Kate. Hi, I'm Kate Ling. I'm the Director of Content Strategy at E&E News. We're here today live at the ARPA-E conference. We're very excited to do that this year. And there's lots going on. People are walking around. Right now, it's lunch. But we're lucky enough to have several program directors join us, and then our reporter as well. So I'll do some introductions here. First, we have Jennifer Gerbi, Jenny Gerbi. She is in charge of some very interesting programs that she'll be talking about that deal with energy efficiency and how to use electricity better on the grid. Then we have Rachel Slaybaugh. She is in charge of one of the newer programs with advanced nuclear technology, which she'll be much better at talking about than me because she has the degree for it and I don't. And then we have our reporter, Christa Marshall, who covers all these lovely technologies for us, as well as some of the science and the politics and the budget up in Congress. So thank you all for joining us. We definitely appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
So we'll just sort of start talking about the programs first, and then we'll get into sort of the politics and budget of it. Jenny, I guess we'll start with you.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to become a program director. I mean, when you become a program director, you're leaving a nice, non-government job to enter the chaos that is the bureaucracy of the government. Mm-hmm. And so why you wanted to become a program director and generally what program directors do, and then we'll sort of dive into what specific programs that you do.
Sure. It's a great question. I think a lot of us come here to make an impact. And I came from industry. I worked in some very large companies. I was at Dow Chemical and I was at Dow Corning as well. And that was great and instructive, but I wanted to do something where I could have more direct impact in terms of the decisions I was making, the research that I was sponsoring, and being able to do that with more freedom. And I heard about ARPA-E from a current program director who told me all about it. And it's this mix of difficult early stage technology along with looking at the market to understand what the solution has to look like in order to make an impact. And I love things where the technology and the market come together. That's actually harder than you would think it is to do sometimes in industry, and so that was really exciting to me. When I came there and I interviewed, I saw that the culture was just incredibly amazing. It was very collaborative. It was not competitive at all. Everybody would help make each other's ideas stronger, and that's always the type of place that I'm looking for. So looking at it, I mean, yes, it's a government agency. No, you don't go there for a huge paycheck, but to be able to work hard and actually get impactful results from that work was super exciting to me. And everything about the agency was interesting to me, including the history. And so it ended up being a very easy decision to go, and I have not regretted that decision. It is a very hard job. We are on the road a lot. You asked what it's like. I'll tell you one aspect of that, which is that we work very closely with our project teams. We have very active management. And so what that means is we have quarterly reviews, often they're face-to-face. We go down into the data. We'll be like, show us the data. Okay, are you sure, statistically validated that you can make this decision? And we go down to that level to understand the progress that's being made, to help give suggestions for things to be better. So we're right there in the trenches with our teams. That's one of the reasons why it's busy, but it's awesome to be able to do that. It's one of the reasons it works so well.
So Jenny has been with ARPA-E now for 3 years?
2.5.
2.5 years. Rachel just joined this previous year, and did you have a similar experience in terms of joining and finding out about it? Or?
So a lot of the reasons are the same. I'll highlight a few reasons that are also ones that Jenny didn't say yet, but for me so I'm a nuclear engineer, nuclear energy, but I've always been really interested in the broader energy system and how all the parts and pieces fit together. And so for me, coming to ARPA-E was a remarkable opportunity to get to talk with people in all these different parts of energy who are all working to solve their piece of the puzzle, to solve the whole puzzle. Mm-hmm. So getting to talk with people in grid and storage and wind and solar and batteries and all these different spaces to learn about what are the boundaries and problems and where's the cutting edge in that space, and to see what problems are different and what problems are the same. It really is a unique opportunity to see the cutting edge in a variety of spaces. that it's just hard to access otherwise. And I'm a professor at Berkeley, and so inside of Berkeley, I'm like very deep in my like little subfield. So the opportunity to go have this very broad, cross-cutting view and really think about problems more strategically was really compelling. And there's an impact opportunity that is, you get to really think about how to set a direction to make a difference in the world, and that's super exciting.
As someone who covers ARPA-E and has for a little while now, what's it like covering the agency because it is so different? They have relatively high turnover with the program directors coming in every 3 years, I believe, right? And and it's they're trying to act a little bit more like the private sector, trying to be more cutting edge with things. Does that make it sort of different in terms of covering the agency?
Interestingly, in a way it hasn't, just because we don't know yet what's going to happen. And as Chris Fall said this morning, the acting head of ARPA-E, until Congress fully defines what's happening, where they're going to keep moving forward. And so in a way, things are different in terms of the focus. Obviously, when you have a new administration come in, there's definitely less focus on climate change, for example, than there was when Obama was president. But in terms of the agency itself, a lot of it is still functioning as it has, just because the appropriations have been on autopilot for so long, and there has never been a definitive decision on Trump's cuts, whether that will happen. So, I mean, the biggest thing that happened in terms of it changing perhaps was the impoundment issue that came up, where some money was held back when Trump came into office. And eventually that money was released. But GAO found that did hold up some projects. But overall, I'd say there's been a lot of continuity so far since Trump has been in.
Nice.
So
that's great. So you guys hopefully have just been able to keep working forward. And what are the programs that you're working on? And either one of you can start, either way.
I'll talk about one.
Okay.
Yeah,
let's do that.
I have 3 programs, and that's because I got one that another program director started right before I came on, and I got his program. I got another program from a program director that left at the end of last year, and then I have my own. So I'll talk about Delta first, because that's the first one I had, and that's the one that will be ending somewhat soon. And that's all about, if you can heat or cool a person locally, then you can extend the ranges on your thermostat and save energy in the building. It turns out that buildings use a ludicrous amount of energy, and a huge amount of that is HVAC, so it's temperature and it's ventilation. So if you make people comfortable at higher or lower temperatures, you can save energy in the building. It's actually really compelling. A relatively small change can save a lot of energy. So what that means is different smart fabrics that maybe react to the temperature, and maybe they will loft up when it gets colder, or they will change in the amount of IR they're reflecting depending on the temperature. That's pretty cool. We also have other technologies that are sort of like almost like a personal air conditioner that uses a phase change material that might be attached to a desk or something else that actually blows cold air during the day, and then at night it releases that heat, and then it can blow cold air the next day. So if you think of having a very big building, and maybe you don't have too many people in that building, if you can give them this thing, then you can very much extend the temperature ranges in that building and save a lot of energy. Or you might be able to prevent a warehouse from becoming air conditioned, because you can keep the individual cool in different areas. So I think that's a really exciting program. A lot of the projects have done just fantastically well. They're here at the summit for people to see, but that's been a really interesting program.
So just to lob something at you,
Sure.
It came into my head, so for the Winter Olympics, I think it was, I forgot who sponsored the team, but their outfits, I know that the jackets were heated. Do you know anything about those jackets? Or
well, I could say
it's
it's relatively easy to resistively heat a garment.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, we've been doing that for a very long time.
Yeah.
So you can buy battery-powered, resistively heated. But I challenge you to find a cooled thing. So we do have one team that, for example, is putting thermoelectrics into garments to actively cool. So it's not just passively cool by, helping, increase, the amount of IR that can penetrate or something like that, but it's actually actively cooling. The hardest thing to do is cool. So some people joked around when this program started that it's the put on a sweater program.
Right.
And I will say on the cold side, there are space heaters, there are sweaters. That is not the hard part. The hard part is the cooling side, and that is the place where there really aren't good solutions today. And one of the things we're finding is that it's very engaging to a lot of first markets in terms of safety, in terms of productivity, in terms of medical markets where, actively cooled vests for people with MS or something like that. I mean, there's actually a lot of applications for this type of technology in really high value markets. And we always look for that because that is a way for the technology to get out there and then get cheaper so it can start to make an impact in the energy space.
Oh, okay, perfect. Meitner, tell us about this great name of the program and where it came from, and then also where you guys are at. I think a big deadline is coming up here. So
so Meitner is ARPA-E's first nuclear fission program. They have a fusion program already, and it's named for Lisa Meitner, who co-discovered fission, and she was never awarded a Nobel Prize for that accomplishment, but really did fantastic research. She was an Austrian physicist, and so it's really a nod to the origin of the technology. And what the program is about is, so right now we have reactors that operate with water. There are a bunch of new technologies that have a bunch of different kinds of physics, materials, properties, and they tend to be very robust, very safe, available for high temperature process heat if you're looking at really like decarbonizing the economy, potential grid integration. There's a lot of potential resolution of issues, consuming nuclear waste, the whole thing. Those technologies are still pretty nascent. They need a lot of development before we can adopt them. And so what the Meitner program is about is enabling those to become a real future. So we're not sure which reactor design is going to be the one that we all want to choose, but there are a collection of technologies that any of them will need. So things like advanced sensoring and data analytics for mostly autonomous operation, things like sophisticated construction techniques so you can build them modularly on time, advanced robotics, a whole bunch of super enhanced heat exchangers, things that will pave the way for any of the technology futures so that whatever the future market looks like, we're set up and ready to go. And so we make it easier to adopt those technologies by lowering the barrier to entry.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question. Following up on Kate, how has uncertainty about the budget affected you guys, if at all, or the programs, itself?
We're too busy to even worry about it. And, the programs, if we have programs that were set up with money from FY16 or FY17, that money has already been set aside for those programs. So that isn't affected by the decisions made in the future.
Yeah, my program's funded, so I'm busy getting my program off the ground, which the full applications are due on Friday. So in a couple of months, we'll know what the teams look like.
Yeah. And you can talk about this a little bit when you talk about the two other programs too, but I'm interested in what these applications actually look like when you get them. Is it just paper or sort of how they come into you? But I also know you want to talk about your other two programs as well. You have so many programs under you.
I know. Yeah. All right, I'll talk about the other two really quickly and then let's get to the process by which we use. So there's one that's called Shield, and what that is, it's to basically retrofit single pane windows. We have a lot of single pane windows, especially in older buildings, and you can't just change those out with double pane glass, and it is amazing how much energy is lost through single pane windows. It's also really uncomfortable to be near them just from the radiation, as we know in our building, where we have that problem. And so the idea is, well, what if you could have some sort of a film or material, for example, that you could put on a single pane window that's, totally clear, very low haze, but it basically slows down the vibrations that go through the material so that heat is not transferred as readily. So it's basically an insulating layer, but that's perfectly clear. Well, if you have that, that would be great from an energy point of view. It's also great from an acoustics point of view. So it can really block a lot of sound comes through the window, which is another problem with single pane windows. And that's where you start to get interesting from a market.
Truck.
Oh, you should hear our conference rooms when we're on a call. Just sirens constantly. Like, we don't even hear them, and then other people are like, what's going on? So that's that, and it's very interesting from a materials point of view. So that's Shield. And then Sensor is the one that I started, and that addresses this issue of heating and cooling and ventilation. So a lot of people know about programmable thermostats and even potentially automatic thermostats, so that when you leave the house, your thermostat changes and you don't even have to do anything. Turns out it's really, really hard to do that. We have very good ways to sense movement. We don't have good ways to sense when somebody is still in a home. And for the market to accept this type of technology, it really can't fail. You cannot have your thermostat turning off in the middle of the night, more than once, or you get completely enraged, or you tweak the software so that basically your heating and cooling's on all the time. The person's happy, you're not saving any energy. So we need fundamentally different technologies in terms of how we sense the presence of people or how we count the number of people in a space. Because if you can sense presence, you can save a lot of money in the home, where you only care about whether or not there are humans or not. But in the workplace and buildings like this, you have ventilation. The ventilation actually uses more energy than heating or cooling. And a lot of times, you'll be in one of these giant rooms that is set to ventilate for 500 people, and there are 4 people in that room. You do not need to ventilate that room at 100%. And a lot of buildings like this have fans that are designed to run at different speeds. What they don't have is the information of how many people are in an HVAC zone. So if you can use a totally new technology that nobody has to think about or do anything with, that can just basically passively tell the control system, there are 15 people in this HVAC zone, there are 2,000 people in this HVAC zone, now you have the information where you can reduce a lot of energy usage from ventilation. And there are really cool technologies people are thinking about, like looking at how Wi-Fi signals are attenuated, or using radar, or using different types of very cheap sensors combined with learning protocol. It turns out it really is a hard problem to do at a low cost to justify using it for energy. Yeah, you can have cameras there and have people and watch the cameras all the time. That is ridiculous in terms of cost. So we want something that's very cheap, easily deployable. We put all that stuff into our program metrics. So we said, you have to show a path towards this cost per square foot. You cannot make somebody wear a beacon. You cannot do this or that. So that we address a lot of these market issues. Okay, make a really new crazy technology, but you have to make it in such a way that you satisfy these market conditions. And then we have something that's impactful. And I was super happy by the types of applications that we got, because they really did have completely new technologies people didn't think of. Technologies from things like, disaster and recovery, where you're looking for heartbeats. Well, you can look for heartbeats maybe. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. So it's exciting.
It might be useful tomorrow. Sorry, just we found out this morning that unfortunately Secretary Perry can't make it. So hopefully the seats will still be filled tomorrow. But
he's doing a video cast.
He's doing a video cast. Yeah. I mean, how is that? Do you think going to change the atmosphere of the?
It's certainly having a first person physically here is always different. But it will be interesting to watch to see if he talks any about if he's if he expresses strong support for ARPA-E when Trump is interested in eliminating it, and if so, if he's talked to members of Congress, how much, if he's talking to Trump, and also if he elaborates more on maybe just the future of the agency. I mean, this morning Chris Fall was saying that they're looking at some different program models, different partnership ideas. So it'll be interesting to see if Perry elaborates kind of on the future of where things may be going.
Sorry, Rachel, I cut you off in the middle of that. I don't know if you were going to talk about sort of what they look like.
I was going to jump a little bit on the programs. So one of the things that Jenny mentioned was the metrics. And I think one of the things that's really powerful about ARPA-E is that we set, for all of our programs, really aggressive metrics that are very forward-thinking, and they're not about what are the boundaries of the technology. It's about what are the boundaries of the technology need to be for market relevance. And so we say, okay, this is where this technology has to get if anybody's going to adopt it, if anybody's going to care about it. So how do we do that? And then so in the application phase, we ask the teams to really lay out how they think they're going to be able to achieve those metrics. And then in the program, we manage them to really accomplish that. And I think the metric setting, the thought that goes into it, the diligence and the background research, and then the integration of the program direction and the ARPA-E office with the teams to really work together to make new things happen is what has led to so much success out of the ARPA-E teams. It's really...
and you pull the plug quickly when something's not working.
We really do.
And having those very clear, well-defined metrics gives you a lot of authority to do that, so that you have very obviously what needs to be measured and what rate they need to hit those milestones. And if people aren't doing it, maybe one of the other teams is. So let's give them rate.
What would be an example of a metric, just so people know? Like what
so for new nuclear reactors, one of our metrics is you need to build a new reactor that is less than $2,000 per kilowatt installed. So it needs to be sort of cost competitive with a new gas plant in that.
And they have to do it within a certain time frame as well. Usually.
Well, it's so overnight construction. So it's that has specific boundaries, but it's shovel in the ground to concrete being finished, cooled kind of a thing.
Sometimes we define a scale. So we'll say at scale, which means 1 million units. Then it would look like this, for example. Or we might have a metric that's like fewer than 2 failures per year.
Yeah.
And this is what a failure means, for
Right.
example.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to show that statistically.
Right.
And what does it mean to show that? But yeah, absolutely, to her point, those metrics are the foundation for solving a problem and having impact. But not to be too flippant about, you know, shutting projects down. I mean, a lot of times we'll have people have a great idea, they do really good work to try to see if that idea will work, and we do high-risk research. Of course not all of it's going to work.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can pivot and sometimes you can't, but it's not a bad thing for anybody that these things get shut down sometimes. It's the responsible thing to do, but also, again, there can be great work behind it. All I ask is that it gets published so other people can see it and don't try to go down the same path.
Yeah.
I count that as a win because I think that that might be failing to reach the goal, but it's failing in the right way. And it was totally worth a shot.
Right. It's the whole point.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
Just to take a small step back, we have a great panel here of women, which is very exciting. And I know tomorrow there's going to be a diversity luncheon that I think Jenny has had a hand in helping organize. But I just wanted to ask about the experience of being, you know, a woman in what is usually a male-dominated field, and then particularly at ARPA-E because, you know, previously there were 2 women directors, acting director, Cheryl Martin, and then Ellen Williams. And obviously right now it's Chris Fall, but just sort of how that has changed the agency in terms of working there, if you think it has, or any thoughts on that.
I mean, my experience coming into ARPA-E was that it's a place where people are trying to do good work, and that's sort of it. It wasn't very much about who you are or what you look like or any of that. It's very much about the projects and about the work and about the quality, and that's how it felt to me. And my understanding in talking to some other people is it hasn't always been that way, so it may be that as ARPA-E has settled into itself, it's been able to create that environment. But that was how it felt for me coming in.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the reasons why it's always challenging is that, you know, when you are super busy, and we're a super lean agency and we're all busy all the time, is a lot of times recruiting is the first thing that drops off the radar. It should be the last thing, but it's always the first thing, right? Because we're all busy. And to be able to recruit people that aren't in your personal network takes more time and effort. And our personal networks almost always look like us. So it's not a surprise that, you know, at places like ARPA-E, where we don't have a bunch of money to throw around and just have other people recruit for us, that people have recruited within their own networks. I would really like us to branch out of that. And we did work, I worked with Ellen on putting together sort of these recruiting plans, and we are talking about that all the time in terms of how we can improve. But it takes time and effort. My background is in physics and material science. I was always like the only girl. Sometimes there was one other one, and that's sort of true today. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings I am where I am always the only woman. I used to like count and then I stopped because it was depressing. So we definitely still have a problem, but I think that problem is very unconscious. I don't think people are trying to create a problem. I think a lot of it is in recruiting. A lot of it is in the networks you form in school, and that a lot of times those networks are like is comfortable and trust like. So I think that we need to push ourselves outside of our existing networks, everybody, not women, to have more inclusive networks, even as early as undergrad. Yeah. And those are the networks that you ping throughout your career in order to get somebody for a job or do a startup with somebody. We have this. We have a bunch of startups that are pitching right now in this lunch we just came from.
Right.
And so I was making a note of how many women were on the teams of these startups. So far, everybody pitching was a man, and every single team was all men. So we'll see at the end of the day how many there were. But I'll bring this up at the lunch tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the reason I give that example is that when you're in a startup, you want to talk about being busy and not having time to recruit. That is a startup, right? And so you do rely on your friends and your colleagues. And if those people are like you, it's going to be very hard to have a diverse team. So that's why I encourage everybody at the earliest stages to branch out and have more diverse teams. All it means is that you have a better chance of getting even better talent in. But it's amazing how these tiny little subtle decisions add up over a career.
And I'll add that it is hard when everybody's busy, but just taking the extra couple of minutes to be like, okay, here's the first round of people I thought of when I'm trying to pick a team or even organize a panel or set up speakers at a conference. Here's the first round of people I think about. Okay, I'm going to take 30 more seconds, and who's the second round of people I think about? Because it's not necessarily you think of the people who look like you first, who's the second round, and taking that like extra beat to do a little bit more thinking, it turns out usually you can get a much wider set of people, and it often helps not only the sort of count metrics diversity, but thought diversity,
Yes.
industry diversity, background diversity, and you end up getting a richer discussion.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm interested, Christa. I keep throwing zingers at Christa because I haven't actually had a chance to like chat with her too much beforehand. But you know, it's similar as a reporter when you're trying to look for sources for a story. You have sort of a first layer, and then if you have time to sit back and do a second layer. And I was sort of interested hearing them sort of talk about it, sort of going back to my reporter days. I'm like, oh yeah, that's something. Is that something that sort of you consider when you're doing a story about, you know, trying to get some more diverse voices in there, and then do you sort of have to sit down and do sort of, okay, here's my first circle, and then
I mean, I think it's part of the reporting. It's not always gender-based, obviously. It's just a question of always wanting to have a fully balanced story. But yeah, it definitely is something that goes into a lot of writing, where you sort of start with the immediate people that comment frequently and then go to another level, and always looking for different voices maybe that haven't been heard before.
Yeah. So one of the things I personally am horrible at is networking, and clearly that's a part of, you know, getting to know people, and one of the big focuses here. So I was wondering if you guys had any advice about icebreakers and what's the best technique, and or a story about someone who did it really well, or maybe someone who did it poorly, although the stories of someone doing it poorly is probably too numerous to really go into, but I was sort of intrigued about any icebreakers you had, advice.
I don't have any magical advice, unfortunately, or best icebreakers. I mean, my advice on how to network is go be interested. Like, presumably, you're trying to build a network in a thing you want to participate in for some reason that has to do with you're interested in it. Mm-hmm. So you probably have questions. There's probably something you want to know from the person you want to talk to. So just go be interested. People love to share what they're doing. People love to talk about themselves. Go ask questions. Go be curious. Go, I mean, you know, don't maybe ask zingers on the opener. But even just things like, what's the most exciting thing you're working on right now? What are you most excited about? What's the coolest thing you heard today? You know, just make a space for people to tell you what's exciting for them.
I have a funny story about this.
Yeah.
I guess I'll tell it. So let's see. I got divorced quite some time ago, and I'm also a super introvert. And so it was a big change for me to go on blind dates. And that is how we date these days. You go on one of the dating sites and you go on a lot of blind dates. So I pushed myself to do that because it helped me get over that sort of introvert barrier, right? Of talking to a new person. And the only way to get over it is to throw yourself right into it. And it's really going to be uncomfortable the first few times. I ended up getting really good at that. Super comfortable, because I did it quite a bit, which was great. You meet new people, you force yourself to have these new conversations. I didn't realize how beneficial that would be to my career, because I also then got over that, you know, fear or hesitation from a career point of view. I'm like, this is nothing, like a bad date. Okay, that's hard. But this, I can talk to anybody for 2 hours. And so it sounds funny, but that to me was like immensely useful. And, you know, at the companies I was at, they, I call it the corporate zodiac, but they would test your personality. And so I was always an INTJ.
Oh,
and I ended up doing this so much that when they tested me again at my new company, I was firmly an ENTJ. And I'm not an extrovert at all, but I can fake it really well now.
Nice.
So my
Fake it till you
recommendation
make it.
is to push yourself to do it.
Right. Get out of your
Over and
comfort
over
zone.
again. You will
Yeah.
lose the fear and become comfortable, and then it's fun. The other thing to do, which I am horrible at and I'm really trying to improve on, is the follow-up side. You know, having your own record of who you talk to and when and what their info is. I have like 2,000 business cards on my desk right now. And I try to at least write on the card where I met the person, because I will forget instantly. Because in our jobs, we meet people all the time. It's one of the best part of our jobs. But, you know, keep getting that information in a useful form. So 2 years later, I need a reviewer for this FOA. Oh, who was that person I talked to 2 years ago? I have no freaking clue.
Yeah.
If I could go back and start over, I would just have like a little personal database that I would put people's contact info in, scan the business cards, do whatever you have to do. And it's really hard to go back and start that from scratch.
Right.
So that is like the number one thing I would change, because that network is super valuable.
Yeah. Christa, do you have any?
On networking?
Yeah.
I mean, DC is a great place for that. I mean, I would say just go to everything that every event that's related to what you're interested in. So if it's physics, find out all the physics associations. I mean, just in journalism, they have DC Science Writers and SEJ, and there's just so many different options of where you can hang with the people in your area.
Yeah, right. Well, ARPA-E is one of them. So if you guys aren't here today, you should definitely come join tomorrow. It's always fun. The technology showcase opens tonight, and it's super interesting always. I bet you guys are looking forward to that. And that's about all the time we have for today. So thanks for joining us. Thank you guys so much. This has been super fun. I could just let us keep talking, but I know we have other stuff to do. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.